In this video, we're going to talk about adding real numbers. Now, some of this may seem simple for some of you, and some of you may need this in-depth review. So fast forward through what you don't need, look at what you want, totally up to you, but it's here in case you need it. So the addition of real numbers and the number line can be visualized using a number line. Locate the first number on the number line and then add a positive number, move to the right, or add a negative number by moving to the left on the number line. So when you are doing this using the number line method, the first number is 5, so I'm going to locate 5. And since I'm adding 4, I'm going to move to the right 4 places. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 plus or 5 plus 4 equals to 9. But you're going to move to the right 4 places. Now, in number 2, I'm going to locate negative 5 first, and then I'm going to move to the right because I'm adding 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So my outcome would be negative 1. When you add two negative numbers together, you locate the first one. But since you're adding a negative number, you're going to move to the left this time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My outcome is negative 10 because that's where we ended. And we moved to the left because we were adding negative 5. Now, the rule without the number lines, and you do not have to use a number line, but that was just to kind of refresh your memory. But adding numbers with the same signs, you add the two numbers, you add their absolute values first, and apply the common sign. If you are adding numbers with different signs, you subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger, and then you apply the sign having the larger absolute value. So in the first example, I am adding two negative numbers together. So this is my rule. I am adding two negative numbers together. So I add their absolute value. So I should be thinking 12 plus 5 is 17. And then I am going to keep the negative number. So what you should be thinking is, since both of them are negative, you should be adding the absolute values of 12 and 5 and keeping the negative since both numbers are negative. Now, the second one is different because we are going to be using the second rule because I have a negative 12 plus 5. Okay, now the absolute value of negative 12 is 12, and the absolute value of 5 is 5. This number is the bigger number. So I should be thinking 12 minus 5, and I get 7. But since the absolute value of 12 we took was negative, our final outcome should be negative 7. You subtract those values, but you keep the sign that was attached to the original number before you took the absolute value. So in number 6, we are going to find a common denominator first. So the common denominator between 4 and 8 is 8. So I need to multiply the first fraction by 2 over 2. So that would be negative 6 over 8 plus 7 over 8. Now, since I have my common denominator, I should be thinking negative 6 plus 7 over 8. Since the absolute value of 7 is 7 and the absolute value of negative 6 is 6, this is bigger and it's positive. So I'm going to subtract those numbers. So 7 minus 6 is 1, and I'm going to keep the positive since the absolute value of 7 is bigger than the absolute value of negative 6. So 1 over 8 would be my answer. Since both of these numbers are the same, I'm going to keep, or the same sign, I'm going to keep the sign, and I should be thinking 10.4 plus 1.8, and the final outcome will be negative. So if you recall, adding decimals, you line up your decimals. So that would be 11.84 as you add that number. So negative 11.84 is our final total for number 7. Okay, now this says add them in your head. So what you should be thinking, both of these numbers are negative, so my outcome is going to be negative, and then I should be adding 10 and 12, and I get 22. Since I have one positive and one negative, I should be subtracting. The absolute value of 15 is negative 15 is bigger than the absolute value of 7. So I should be thinking 15 minus 7, that gives me 8. But since the absolute value of negative 15 was bigger than the absolute value of 7, my 8 needs that negative sign. Now, all three numbers are negative, which indicates when you add three negative numbers, you end up with a negative number. You should be thinking 6 plus 2 plus 3, which gives you negative 11. The next set is translation and then simplify. So the sum of 39 and negative 71, so 39 plus negative 71. You should be thinking absolute value of negative 71 is bigger than the absolute value of 39. So you should be thinking 71 minus 39. And that gives you 32. But we're going to make it negative because the absolute value of negative 71 is larger than the absolute value of 39. Now, in number 12, we have negative 28 increased by 15. Here again, we're going to subtract because we have different signs. So the absolute value of 28 is larger than the absolute value of 15. And when you subtract, you get 13. But we're going to attach a negative to it because the absolute value of negative 28 is bigger than the absolute value of 15. Now, in this problem, we're going to take 134 and we're going to add it to the sum of these two numbers. So 134 added to negative 61 plus negative 56. So we're actually going to have to combine both steps for adding numbers. Parentheses or the group first. So we're going to take these two numbers and add them together because they have the same sign. So 134 plus negative 117. That's what you get when you add negative 61 to negative 56. Now, since I have different signs, I have to go through and subtract. So I should be thinking 134 minus 117 because the absolute value of 134 is bigger than the absolute value of negative 117. When I subtract those two numbers, I get 17. Now 17 is going to stay positive because 134 was the larger of the two absolute values and it was positive to begin with. So negative 1/2 in number 14 added to 3/4. So 3/4 plus negative 1/2. We need a common denominator. In this case would be 4. So 3/4 plus negative 2/4. So we're going to keep that common denominator and we've got 3 plus negative 2. Since we've got a positive and a negative, we actually subtract and we end up with 1/4. Now, applications involving the addition of real numbers. On Sunday, the temperature in Denver, Colorado was negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit by 9 a.m. By 7 p.m., the temperature had risen 5 degrees. Find the temperature at 7 p.m. So if we started our day at -4 and we went up 5 degrees, we are now at 1 degree. So the temperature is 1 degree Fahrenheit at 7 p.m. Now, in the next example, we are reviewing the chart of Matthew's revenue from his pizza parlor in the last 5 years. And it asks what was the total revenue for the first and the second year. Well, the total revenue first year was $1,697. In the second year, he didn't do so well. So when I add those two together, I technically subtract. So I should be saying 1,697 minus 1,325, and that gives me 372. But that 372 will stay positive because this absolute value is bigger than negative 1325's absolute value. So the revenue for the first 2 years was $372. Now, the second part and the final question for this lesson wants to know what the revenue is for the 5-year period. So we're going to take our 1697, we're going to add our negative 1325 for the second year. We will add our 2318 for the third. We will add our negative 956 for the fourth, and then add 657. So what you can do is you can add up all your positive numbers. So you could think, add up these 3 numbers, all of the positives. Then you can add up all of your negatives. And then you can add those totals together. So what I did is I took these 3 numbers, added them together, and I came up with 4,672. I took my 2 negative numbers and came up with negative 2,281. And then I added these 2 totals together, which means I really subtracted them and kept the positive sign because the absolute value of 4,672 is bigger than the absolute value of the negative number. So when I added both of those numbers together, I ended up with positive 3,000 or positive 2,391. So the revenue for 5 years is $2,391. If you have any questions or concerns about any of the topics discussed, please make sure that you ask them during class time.